everyone, and thanks so much for joining me. I'm sorry I'm a bit late. I had some issues with the microphone, and I'm hoping that it's working. It is showing me that it's working. Um, yeah, and I went through some of your comments from my previous live in regards to the sound. Now, I really do want to apologize if the sound is not the best. Unfortunately, I'm working with what I have here. I don't have a team behind me, so it's just me on my own, and I'm setting up everything. I'm working again with the equipment that I have, and unfortunately, it's not so professional. So right now, I can't really afford to invest in any kind of professional equipment. They are very expensive. So I'm doing my best, guys. So I really apologize for the sound issues if there will be any. Okay, I'm just going to catch up on some of your comments, guys, because I've seen that you've left some comments a bit earlier. Let me see. Let me see until somebody says hello in the comments. Hi, Debbie. Thank you so much for joining. Somehow I lost all the previous ones. Hi, Dean. Thank you for joining. Is it too low? Oh, okay. Let me see. Is it any better? Boo, 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 boo. Yes? So it's better. Okay. Oh, God. I don't know what I'm doing. Very low still. Oh, hi, Tina. Hi, Bernadette. Okay, let me see. Oh, gosh. How about now? Is it better? Any better? I don't even know which microphone I'm using. Is it the computer's microphone? Is it the external microphone? Hey, Jay, thanks for joining. Do you guys still hear me very low? Okay. Okay, great, great, great. Okay. Finally, finally. You know what? I do have an external microphone which is plugged into my computer, but I don't even know which one I'm using, if I'm honest with you. I'm rubbish at this. Okay, great. So we just spent the first 5 minutes sorting out the microphone. Red Eye, hi, everybody. Thank you for joining and thank you for watching. So we are left at chapter number 12 from Goncalo Amaral's new book. I know some of you in the comments on my previous live said that I should perhaps talk about, just wrap up around the previous live, what we read. If I'm honest with you, I forgot what we read, okay? I know that we read and I know what we read and everything else. I just can't really pinpoint what exactly was read in the previous lives. So that's why I usually say, and I said in my previous lives as well, that I'm not going to wrap up what I said in the previous live, and I'll just, move on with the next chapters. Because if I want to give you an overview of the previous live, then I'll have to go and rewatch the live and then make notes and then, have notes ready and yeah, something like that. That's why I said that it's much better if I just number these lives so that you know part one, part two, part three, and then you can watch them whenever you have time to. Okay, so I'm going to put this on the screen now. There it is. From the first try, can you believe it? I always have some kind of issues whenever I go live. Okay. Chapter 12, In Search of Information. The neighborhood investigation was initiated immediately after the report of the disappearance. There was an investigation coordinator in the neighborhood, and that coordination task was not assigned to the lead investigator, who is ultimately responsible for the investigation to avoid duplication of effort. This allowed all positive information to be channeled through one control point, which made processing more efficient. Through in-depth interviews, standardized sets of questions were used to ensure the integrity of all information. The interviews, in addition to the basic who, what, when, where, and why questions, were intended to go beyond the basic who, what, when, where, and why questions. Witnesses were questioned about their observations before and after the disappearance. Records of all employees of the Ocean Club and other resorts in the area were reviewed, seeking to identify individuals who had been questioned or dismissed for inappropriate or suspicious behavior. Information was gathered from authorities on incidents of spying, loitering, and trespassing in residential or resort communities, but no identifying information was provided. The Ocean Club and other resorts in the area were checked to see if any tourists staying there had planned to leave after 3rd of May 2007, as well as the possibility that any staff members were off duty on the date of the incident. The proximity of the sighting to the place of disappearance was important in assessing the validity of the charge of abduction. Observations of the victim's behavior taken passively raised the question of whether she had been taken away, drugged, or killed. The dynamics of the neighborhood in recent weeks and months were ascertained. It was ascertained that there were no child abduction attempts in the area. Identified and located those suspected of child abuse, burglary, or theft who had left the neighborhood before or after the disappearance, resort staff, residents, and tourists. The history of people who had lived in the area was ascertained from landlords and long-term residents. Questions were asked about suspicious activities, and people who were in the area several days, even weeks, before the disappearance, and it was determined who might have been seen in the area around the time of the disappearance and what they might have seen or should have seen. Maps of the area were obtained, including the ongoing construction works on the street adjacent to the place of disappearance, the houses of the suspects, the tourist village, and the church. Areas in the neighborhood where the victim might be hiding were identified. Bars, liquor shops, fast food outlets, and holiday restaurants were identified, but no identifying information was provided. The Ocean Club and other resorts in the area were checked to see if any tourists staying there had checked out early after 3rd of May 2007, as well as the possibility that any employees were off duty on the day of the incident. The proximity of the sighting to the place of disappearance was important in assessing the validity of the charge of abduction. Observations of the victim's behavior taken passively raised the question of whether she had been taken away, drugged, or killed. And I think that it's repeating here again. And I'm going to skip and move down to see, okay, over here. From the location of the disappearance in an area covering several tens of kilometers, image recording systems were located in commercial establishments, hotels, petrol stations, and on the Via do Infante, a road that runs the length of the Algarve. Martin's receipt was obtained at Kelly's bar on the night of 3rd of May 2007 in order to establish the time that he saw the man carrying a child, later identified with 80% probability as the child's father. Confirmatory data was collected from the time the police were notified of the disappearance, from nursery records, from tennis matches, in an effort to correctly construct the timeline. The structure set up by the judicial police included a command and crisis management center with support services, field investigators, information analysts, and translators, distributing tasks and missions, not forgetting liaison with the victim's family through a liaison officer. Work with the media was also activated through the use of an official police spokesperson. A swift response was produced along with a thorough investigation without prior planning, admittedly, but with the elaboration and execution of a plan that always kept all theories open. Chapter 13. Analysis of mobile phone traffic information. Data were collected from the mobile phone company's records, mobile communication tower depots, to obtain information on the activity of the communication towers. The records contained in the child's parents' mobile phones were analyzed, and two strange situations were found. The phone calls related to the days before the disappearance were deleted. On the night of 3rd of May 2007, the child's mother's mobile phone has a record of an incoming call from her husband, but there is no record of an outgoing call on her husband's mobile phone. The whereabouts of the child's father is unknown at 11:17 p.m. on 3rd of May 2007. The British police received information from a person who claimed to have seen him on the beach that night. Initially, the information was not assessed, but by the time the police wanted to work on it, he had disappeared. So, as you can see, it's clear that they deleted phone records. And obviously, that is going to be strange because you have a record of an incoming call from Jerry, but then there is no outgoing call on Jerry's phone. So even when they tried to kind of delete and get rid of evidence, they still didn't do it properly. Hi, Moog. Thank you so much for joining, and thank you. After the discovery of the relevant traces inside the flat and the car used by the girl's parents, the analysis of the information on communications traffic in the area went on for months. This type of analysis and investigation did not cover the mobile phones of those living with and accompanying the child's parents at the time, mainly Michael, who is married to a cousin of the child's mother, and who from the very beginning took charge of the response to the disappearance, and the brother-in-law of the missing child's father. The critical periods are Michael's stays in the Algarve, mainly when his parents are abroad. Another necessary analysis relates to the hurried arrival in the Algarve of the Anglican priest and his wife Susan, replacing the incumbent priest in the Church of Light, who is said to live in Canada and to be a neighbor of the aunt of the child's mother, known as Nora. I'm trying to remember who is this Michael W. Who is that Michael? Oh, my brain. My brain hurts and I can't figure out who is that Michael. It is known that Nora arrived in Praia da Luz on 4th of May. It's important to verify from that moment onwards that she did not call the aforementioned priest and or his wife in Canada. For the information sector, the main objective of the operational analysis is to suggest paths for the investigation and to open up new research perspectives, and the analyst must maintain an objective stance, not allowing subjectivity to overlap with the results obtained. To get an idea of the difficulties of data analysis, let us take 3rd of May 2007 as an example. On that day, 1,859 mobile phone numbers, national and foreign, activated the antennas, but not on the 4th. And many of the numbers are prepaid cards. This was important in relation to the abduction hypothesis, the detection of someone whose mobile phone was operating on the Praia da Luz antennas on the day of the missing person alert and who stopped doing so the following day and could have taken the child from that area. From 2nd to 4th of May alone, there were 74,104 communications. The information analysis sector advised that it was necessary to cross-reference the 1,859 mobile phone numbers with the Spanish operators, given the proximity of the border. It was almost impracticable. The initial analysis focused on the contacts made by mobile phones and known phones of the 9 adult members of the group in the period between the 2nd and 4th of May 2007. At 1 hour 17 minutes 17 seconds on 4th of May 2007, David Payne made the first contact following the missing persons alert with the mobile phone of his mother-in-law, Diane, Diane. He also contacted Russell O'Brien, who was outside the area of influence of the antennas serving Praia da Luz. It was only in the morning of that day that the members of the group were brought to the premises of the judicial police for the first formal statements. Oh, Michael Wright. Hey, Jenny. Oh, okay, Michael Wright. Right, okay. They searched for contacts before and after the alert of the disappearance to check if any of them would be in Praia da Luz before the alert. It was discovered that the number 447-967-016-678 is common to Russell O'Brien and the mother of the missing child. This number sent a message and received another message from the child's mother before her disappearance at 12:31:33 and 13:34:53 on 3rd of May. At that time, the number 447-967-016-678 was outside the influence of the antenna serving the town of Praia da Luz, but when he received the contact made by Russell O'Brien on the 4th, at 19:43, he was already in Praia da Luz. In the early hours of 4th of May 2007, the child's mother exchanged messages with the same number again, at 6:02, 6:04, 8:06, and 8:07, and ended up talking to the user of this mobile phone at 10:20, maintaining this conversation for 171 seconds. After Russell O'Brien's contact, This number contacts the UK residence of the child's parents, and the number 447754774842, which activated an antenna in Praia da Luz at 1954 when it connects with the number 447722059235. This number was not in Praia da Luz. This number 44967016678 also contacted the number 441162302061, which was contacted by the child's father at 12:45 p.m. on 4th of May. Following the missing person alert, the mobile phone of the child's mother registered intense activity. While there were only 12 contacts until then, between 23:14, contact with the child's father, and 23:57 on 4th of May, there were 132 contacts. At 12:47 p.m. on 4th of May, the child's mother received a phone call from the number 289-301-562 Bar Pacifico in Villamora, and the conversation lasted 239 seconds. A few minutes later, at 1:02, she received another call from this number lasting 223 seconds. Throughout 4th of May, the child's mother contacted British mobile numbers whose owners are unknown, who in turn contacted Portuguese mobile phones whose respective owners are also unknown. In the early hours of 4th of May 2007, the child's mother again exchanged messages with the number 447-967-016-678 at 6:02, 6:04, 8:06, and 8:07, and finally contacted the user of that mobile phone at 10:20, continuing this conversation for 171 seconds. After Russell O'Brien's contact, this number 678 contacts the UK residence of the child's parents. Oh, I think that this is repeating again. Yeah. Okay, we are here, the child's father. The child's father, with regard to the other elements of the group, only maintains contact with his wife. Before the missing person alert, he received 14 messages from the number 4478-185-20047 on 2nd of May between 8:07 and 10:49. Following the alert, there was an increase in the intensity of traffic on the child's father's mobile phone, contacting and being contacted by Portuguese and British numbers, some of which were in Praia da Luz. The first contact after the missing person alert was with his wife at 23:14 and 23:17. Between 1:43 and 4:14, he was either not in the area of the Praia da Luz antennas, or he stopped receiving contacts, which happened again at 4:20 and 7:06. Ali is saying Jane Tanner also contacted Christina, DNA expert, on first to explore how to remove DNA. Yes, I've heard about that, but sadly, in the book there are only the numbers mentioned, so I'm not sure which number belongs to who really. Chapter 14, Profile of a Suspect. Open hypothesis. The behavioral investigation report was produced by the NPIA, National Policing Improvement Agency, dated 1st of June 2007, and has as its main terms of reference to analyze the information known to the investigation teams to consider and provide an informed opinion on the possible circumstances surrounding the disappearance, to consider and provide an informed opinion on the possible characteristics of the perpetrator responsible for the disappearance based on the prioritized circumstances. The material used for analysis consists of summaries of the statements of the parents of the missing child, of David Payne, Fiona Payne, of Diane Webster, Jane Tanner, Russell O'Brien, Rachel M., Matthew Oldfield, plus the statement of Jeremy. The statement of control risks, photocopies of photographs showing the interior and exterior of the scene, aerial photography of the scene and surroundings. It should be noted that the author of the report did not include in the analysis the statements of Pamela, a resident of the upper flat, the testimony of Catherine and Savio, who on 16th of May 2007 reported David Payne to the British police in relation to gestures of a sexual nature made in the presence of the child's father during a holiday period in 2005 on the Spanish island of Mallorca. He also excluded the testimony of Yvonne, a British certified social worker who said she had met David Payne in the course of her work supporting abused children, but couldn't recall whether he was a witness or a suspect. Of Martin Smith and his family, who said they had seen a man with a child on his lap. This behavioral report is based on what the suspects and their friends say about the event and does not take into account testimonies from outside the group that cast doubt on what they say. The authors of this report did not include in the analysis the child's victimization, for example, medical history and possible situations of maltreatment or abuse. They also make the mistake of claiming that the entry into the flat was forced when there is no evidence of this. They engage in speculation when they report that the abductor would have watched the child and found out the specific place where she slept through the holes in the blinds of the bedroom window. The mother stated that these blinds were always closed as well as the curtains drawn, which in itself prevented her from being seen from the outside. They considered that the last confirmed sighting of the child was at around 21:05 and claimed that the father's statement was sufficiently detailed to confirm that it was a positive sighting. Have they forgotten that it is a parent and not someone outside the family? Later, they contradict themselves when they state that the statement, despite representing a richly detailed view of the child's position and the father's recollection of positive emotions, is not unreasonable that he was motivated by a desire to present a positive image. In other words, having informed his wife and others that he had indeed gone to see the children, it may have been difficult to admit a contrary version of events immediately after such tragic circumstances. The first hypothesis, with the possibility of some logic following that sighting, start from the premises without and with the involvement of a third party, dropping the possibility that the person responsible for the disappearance was or was not a stranger to the child. The hypothesis of being dead or alive was analyzed. If she was dead, it would have been due to an accident or exposure. If she was alive, the hypothesis of not found and subsequent involvement of a third party was opened. In short, the conduct report states that the possibility that the disappearance of the child after the last sighting was due to her own independent action without the involvement of third parties was considered extremely low, regardless of the final outcome. And in the logic of the author of this report, the lack of support for hypotheses involving the disappearance without the involvement of third parties, gives priority to the inference that she will have been abducted. Nothing could be simpler. The girl did not leave the flat alone, therefore she was abducted. The question then arose as to whether the child had been abducted, alive or dead. For example, whether she left the flat with the involvement of a third party, dead or alive. As for the first hypothesis, having left dead, the probability is said to be rather low. As for living alive, four possible motivations underlying the circumstances in which the abduction took place have been identified: profit, child trafficking, ransom, feeling a maternal void or desire, or sexual. The profit child trafficking motivation hypothesis and line of inquiry had to be prioritized, although it was felt that at the time, from a behavioral or investigative point of view, there was insufficient data to better gauge whether the known circumstances were in line with what might be expected in such a scenario. Drawing attention to the fact that most trafficking of children for profit involves the purchase and not the abduction of children from their parents or legal guardians. As for the motivation of ransom, this hypothesis is ruled out as no ransom was demanded. It said, kidnappings of a child at such a young age are extremely rare, representing less than 1% of all kidnappings. An abduction motivated by feeling a maternal void or desire was also ruled out by behavioral experts. Typically, the victims of such abductions are newborn children, and the missing child was just too old to fit that profile. The fact that the abductor didn't opt for one of the younger siblings reduces the prioritization of this hypothesis. The fact that he left the child stuffed animal suggested a different motivation. The report got to the point it seemed to want to reach: the sexual motivation of the abduction. The prioritization of this hypothesis would be obvious to the author of the behavioral report. According to the expert, for two reasons, sexually motivated abductions represent the most common type of non-family abduction. The absence of convincing evidence for this hypothesis, which according to the behavioral expert would be present in many of the other hypotheses, was such as to increase the potential for it to be an abduction motivated by sexual gratification. It mattered little that research had been done over the years because research-based evidence is far from conclusive. It mattered little that statistically the age of victims of sexual abduction was in the range of 6 to 14 years and that the child was outside that age range and was at the lower end of the age ranges expected for sexual abduction. As to whether child abduction could have a fatal outcome, the abductions, represent potential outcomes regardless of the underlying motivation. For the authors of the behavioral report, the accident scenario without third-party involvement described above seems unlikely. Death following a homicide seems to be the obvious scenario. According to the author of the behavioral report, UK statistics underline the rarity of cases where missing persons are victims of homicide. The age of the missing child increases the risk of being a victim of homicide, but statistically the probability was very low, at 1 in over 3,000. In this area, it seems that the research is already conclusive. When it comes to sexually motivated abduction, such as the one prioritized, the case is different because the risk of the victim's mortality increases. Published research has concluded that the abduction of preschool children results in the death of the child within 48 hours, with the majority of children, 82%, usually being killed immediately. And when it is an abduction motivated by sexual gratification, 50% of children were killed immediately or within 24 hours of abduction. So my understanding is that this behavioral report was created by professionals from the UK. I see. I think RM is referring to. I think RM is Robert Murat. Yeah, that's it. Kind of made the connection because there's mention of him owning properties and stuff like that. In the UK, Derbyshire Police have created a database called Catchem, centralized analytical team collating homicide expertise management, managed by the NPIA, which represents a distillation of the facts from a comprehensive study of child sexually motivated homicides and the people who have committed these homicides over the last 45 years. In this database, a child is defined as an individual up to the age of 18. The author of the report uses the statistics in this database to reinforce the likelihood of a higher risk of victim mortality in the case of a sexually motivated abduction. Thus, in 76% of such kidnapping homicide cases, the victim was killed within 6 hours of the abduction, with 97% killed within 24 hours and 100% killed within 3 days of the abduction. As we have already written, the worst case is a sexually motivated abduction, in which the death of the child at preschool age is the almost inevitable outcome. To suggest that this child has been abducted by a PDF or a sexual abuser is to think of his or her death. Traditionally, the circumstances that present the greatest risk of mortality are related to the best guarantee of personal safety for the abductor who, after sexually abusing the child, concludes that is necessary to kill the child in order to keep him or his or her identity hidden. Summarizing this first part of the report, it was said, it can therefore be briefly stated that the disappearance is more likely to be the result of the involvement of third parties than of actions independent of his own initiative. Given this broad hypothesis, the more specific scenario of a sexually motivated offender is considered to be the one that deserves more attention and priority, and the likelihood of a fatal outcome is underlined. But the behavioral report didn't stop there. In the item entitled Other Considerations in the Material Investigation, they address the possible involvement of the parents in the disappearance of their daughter. In the summary of this point, they state the following. The possible involvement of the family in the disappearance of the child cannot be ruled out, and it can be considered that in weighing up the investigative basis, this hypothesis deserves as much attention as the sexually motivated offender hypothesis prioritized above. It must be stressed that there is no evidence directly supporting a family involvement, but given the absence of decisive evidence to the contrary, such a hypothesis must be explored beyond the alternative scenarios explained in the hypothesis tree presented at the beginning of this report. This hypothesis, put forward by the NPIA experts, arose following the analysis carried out of the circumstances surrounding the child's disappearance and the doubts raised by the testimony of her father, the last person to see the child, according to his statement, at 21:05 on 3rd of May. These doubts were expressed in the report as follows. It should be emphasized that despite representing a detailed view, rich in detail about the child's position and the father's recollection of positive emotions, Is not unreasonable that such a statement was motivated by a desire to present a positive image. That is, having informed his wife and others that he had indeed gone to see the children, it may have been difficult to admit a contrary version of events in the immediate aftermath of such tragic circumstances. In other words, it was doubted that the father had actually seen his daughter and that he only wanted to give a positive image. Ali is saying, look it up, John Mccann, Stratum Pharmaceutical Limited, based in Banff, Scotland. I've read here in the comments, you are saying some really interesting things on there about their connections and everything. And it kind of seems like every single member who is allegedly involved has some kind of connection to the pharmaceutical industry, medicine, and stuff like that. And you know, when you have a connection to the pharmaceutical industry, that's a really big connection. Attention was drawn to the fact that taking one or more sightings for granted, which later turned out to be wrong, will have a detrimental effect on the whole investigation. It was therefore important to corroborate this last sighting, to focus the investigation from that point, and to avoid dismissing previously corroborated sightings. The testimony of the missing girl's father was never corroborated and is full of inconsistencies and contradictions. The author of the report felt the need to discuss the importance of the circumstances under which sightings are reported, which must be carefully considered given the reliability of witnesses. A common occurrence in missing persons investigations that end up becoming homicides is the introduction of sightings after the victim is known to have been abducted or murdered. There are many reasons for reporting these sightings, most of which are not malicious. They include misidentification, recalling an event that occurred at a different time or date, as well as emphatic sightings where witnesses want to believe that the missing person is still alive. It often happens that the criminal claims to have seen the missing person after he or she has killed him or her. What one wonders is why the author of the report wrote these sentences. Was he suggesting something? What? Perhaps it was just the need to explain the problem of sightings to the unsuspecting Portuguese police and nothing more than that. Further on, it was concluded that going back to the starting point of the hypothesis tree, the last sighting, one has to take into account the last missing hypothesis that the child came out of the flat already dead. It was stressed that at the time there was no evidence to suggest that the father deliberately provided a false account. The author of the report did not highlight the contradictions, inconsistencies, and lies contained in the statements of the child's father, mother, and the other friends who made up the holiday group. But even so, due account should be taken of the possible involvement of the family as a necessary precaution to avoid placing too much reliance on one line of inquiry to the detriment of an alternate hypothesis. In a case as complex as this one, with no clear definition of what happened, although the evidence points to the possible responsibility of the parents in the disappearance, the possible involvement of a third party external to the family cannot be ruled out. However, to construct an alleged PDF or sexual abuser as if these were the only lines of inquiry, to say the least, following a dark path. The author of the report confirmed what we suspected and wrote that a full analysis of the family's possible involvement had not been carried out, advancing questions that seemed pertinent to him. The last confirmed sighting of the child outside the immediate family is difficult to determine with certainty, but appears to be around 5:30 p.m. It's unclear whether David Payne physically saw the child when he stated that the children were almost ready for bed but were tired and didn't turn up at the playground. The failure of the children to come to the playground on the evening of 3rd of May 2007 appears to have been a break in the established routine. Both the mother and father suggest that they read stories to their children before going to bed. There appears to be a gap between approximately 7 p.m. and 8:35 p.m. when it is not possible to corroborate the whereabouts of the child's parents. For the author of the behavioral report, it was important to interview Sean and Emily Mccann, as well as using specialist abduction and homicide dogs to help determine whether the missing child had died in the flat. The boys' siblings were not interviewed because their mother said that at just over 2 years old, they could not express themselves properly. The dogs were used with the positive results mentioned above, but the indications of the existence of a body in that flat and on the farm owned by the parents were not assessed. This behavioral report put the recommended investigative focus on a possible involvement of the family and sexually motivated strangers, and even profiled the possible offender. With regards to a sexually motivated offender, a stranger to the family, the following profile was defined. Taking into account the age of the victim, there is a possibility that she is a PDF and not a PDF. There are differences between the two, although the terms are often used interchangeably. Not all PDFs are PDFs. Oh, this is a bit confusing. A PDF can have mere sexual fantasies without abusing a child. On the other hand, not all PDFs are PDFs. There are cases of individuals who prefer to have sex with adults and preferential abusers. Oh, sorry. There are cases of individuals who prefer to have sex with adults and sporadically with children without necessarily targeting them. They are situational and preferential abusers. The former do not have a real sexual preference for children, but have sex with them for various and sometimes complex reasons, while the preferential offender has a specific sexual preference for children. For the author of this report, it is more likely that the child abductor is a preferential PDF, pointing out the following reasons. It's inferred that the crime involved some degree of planning because it's highly unlikely that the criminal would force his way into a flat at random and take the first child he found. The risks involved are enormous and require a calculation of the potential reward. The offender will have carried out some prior surveillance of the flat, either through blinds that would allow the sleeping child to be seen, or through more prolonged surveillance of the family and associated routines. He concludes that the criminal identified the child as a specific target. This inferred surveillance denotes a fixated offender characterized by premeditated and pre-planned crimes. Thus, we would be dealing with a preferential abuser of children. The age of the abductor was prioritized in three grades. Priority 1, 20 to 40 years old. Priority 2, 15, 19, 41 to 49 years old. Priority 3, 10, 14, 50 to 55 years old. The offender was considered to have demonstrated a degree of self discipline in that, although the offense could be described as relatively high risk, the offender nevertheless displayed rational behavior and managed to escape without witnesses. Witnesses or no witnesses. For the author of the behavioral report, the offender did not impulsively remove a person from a public place and demonstrated sufficient presence of mind to remove the child from the vicinity where searches should have found her. Oh, and here is repeating again. In the case where the child was killed, the disposal of the body also demonstrated a sufficient degree of thought and execution so that the body was not found. All of these actions taken together suggest a level of maturity that can be inferred as a result of age. And if one speculates on the possibility that a vehicle was used, the perpetrator is not among the youngest possible offenders. As for gender, the offender will be a male individual in view of the enormous statistical probability. Only 5% of sexual offenses against children are committed by women. As for ethnic characteristics of the offender, oh, excuse me. As for the ethnic characteristics of the offender, statistical data is pointed out that the vast majority of victims are attacked by an offender belonging to the same ethnic group. Drawing attention to the relevance of this reality, research should focus on the general context of individuals with sufficient opportunity. For example, individuals who, statistically speaking, have been shown to mostly commit crimes in places with which they are familiar. It's very likely that the offender had visited the place before. As for the number of offenders involved in the abduction, the author of the behavioral report uses statistics to conclude that the vast majority of these sexually motivated abductions are committed by a single person. Chapter 15. The friend will know more than she says. Jane Tanner, a friend of the child's parents, is presented from the outset as the witness who lends credibility to the occurrence of an abduction through her sighting of a man with a child on his lap. A man who, from her first testimony, she didn't see in detail, but who, over time, she recognized in several robot portraits. From the moment he recon- from the moment she recognized Robert Murat, who lived near the flat where the child had disappeared, she didn't stop producing false recognitions. It seems that her testimony became more accurate as the months and years went by. She never acknowledged that the child on her lap was Maddie. And in his testimonies, at some point, the child was no longer on his lap, but was carrying lying in the man's arms. This is not an innocent way of carrying a child, only so the supposedly credible witness could see the color of the child's pajamas. It's not a natural way to carry a 4-year-old child who weighs about 30 kilograms and is 90 centimeters tall. The normal way to carry that and any other child is the way described by Martin Smith's family. Oh, where was I? It's not a natural way to carry a 4-year-old child who weighs about 30 kilos and is 90 centimeters tall. The normal way to carry that and any other child is the way described by Martin Smith's family. For example, head resting on the man's shoulder, body stretched vertically, the man's arms holding her and wrapping her in an embrace, which led them to recognize the father with an 80% chance. So innocent is not the means of transport described by Jane Tanner that the parents' production for their Channel 4 documentary attempts to deceive reality by showing a man carrying a child lying in his arms as the one Martin Smith would have seen, that need to deceive viewers by recreating false images. Note that only months after the testimony of Martin Smith's family, they are able to make a portrait robot. This head-to-toe portrait is said to be based on Jane Tanner's description. Jane Tanner's testimony had to be given credibility, and incredible as it may seem, the figure of the man with the child on his lap was close to the description of the Martin Smith family. Of the Martin Smith's figure of the man with a child on his lap. Oh no, what did I do here? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm going to start again there. Jane Turner's testimony had to be given credibility, and incredible as it may seem, the figure of the man with the child on his lap was close to the description of Martin's family. This conclusion is also mentioned in the mother's book, which took care to draw attention to these similarities with the clear intention of considering these two sightings as proof that an abduction had taken place. I have said it here before and I repeat it again. Jane Tanner may have seen a man with a child on her lap, but not in the place and at the time indicated by her. It's proven in the Portuguese criminal case file that, contrary to what she claims, she did not, on her way home, pass by the father of the child who was talking to the witness, Jeremy. The witness who was walking his young son that night and who was talking to the father of the missing child near his flat, claiming that at some point during the walk he saw a woman in a purple dress, a friend of the child's parents, smoking a cigarette outside the house. It subsequently turned out to be Jane Tanner and Russell O'Brien's flat. Located in the side corridor of the block of flats, as mentioned in the first report drawn up by the members of the Judicial Police, who on the 3rd of May 2007 went to the scene. I believe that it was at this place that Jane Tanner saw the man with the child on her lap, but the person she saw may have been an acquaintance of hers, and this is the only way to justify the lie. We have no doubt that Jane Tanner knows more than she claims. There is only one way to justify Jane Tanner's statement: for someone to come forward and say that she passed that street with a child on her lap. For years, no one answered the call. No one was willing to testify on Jane Tanner's behalf. Okay, let me see. Hey Richie, thanks for joining. Oh, I can see here a question from Chumba. He's asking, do you know her? Is Jane transgender? I don't think I've ever had a thought like that, or an idea like that, or a question like that, if I'm honest with you. What would make you think that Jane is transgender? Transgender. Guys, we've been doing this now for 1 hour, so I'm just gonna take like a 5 minutes break. I really need to drink some water, and I need to make a coffee because my eyes are literally shutting down as I'm reading. Somehow this always happens. Whenever I edit a video and I hear myself talking, and whenever I read to edit the video, I'm getting very sleepy for some reason. Hey, Gabriel. Thanks, Dean. Okay, guys, you guys go and grab a coffee as well, or a drink, or tea, or whatever, water. And I'll be back in 5 minutes, guys. I'll see you in a bit. Hey guys, I'm back. Did you have a coffee or tea or whatever else? Oh, I was like, wake up, wake up. And I read through the comments here. There's one from Dean. It seems very strange that all the well-paid people went on holiday to a crap, complete dining room to K away. Yeah, that seems very odd to me as well, considering that all of them are with medical backgrounds and they have their medical careers. So I found that weird from the beginning. And also, I think he was out of season as well, which I know that people who are trying to save money with kids, they do go out of season on holidays, but not doctors and medical professionals. Red eye. Cheer up, Jerry. We're on holiday. I didn't come here for fun, was his reply. Strange. Yes, very strange. I think that's the footage from the coach from the bus, which was taking them from the airport, wasn't it? Ali saying just had some delicious homemade elderflower lemonade. Oh my God, that sounds amazing. Oh, I actually wanted to do my own elderflower, but I couldn't find the elderflowers. My own elderflower lemonade. Yes, maybe next year. Okay, chapter number 16. Do you still have it on your screen? Let me see. Yes, you do. The mysterious friend. A few days after the disappearance, a Portuguese newspaper showed a photograph of the child's father, accompanied by a stranger, on what could be a mere hygiene walk or a search for the child's body among the rocks of the coast. They were on the donut at the spot where Martin Smith's family claims to have seen at 10 p.m. on 3rd of May a man with a child on his lap walking towards one of the access paths to the cliffs. The father's companion is Michael Wright, married to a cousin of the child's mother, whose mother, called Nora, lives in Canada and would be a neighbor of the Anglican priest Hubert and his wife Susan, who came in a hurry to replace the Anglican priest in Praia a few days after the disappearance, as I have already mentioned. You know what they say, because this reminded me of something. It says here that Jerry was accompanied by this stranger, by Michael, on what could be a hygiene walk or a search for the child's body among the rocks of the coast. Okay, do you know, if you guys watch true crime in general, true crime cases, also true crime shows, right? There is always mention that a killer returns to the scene of the crime. That's something very interesting to keep in mind, because I assume, and this is just my assumption and my opinion, the Mccanns, don't sue me, I'm just giving my opinion here, you know, freedom of speech and all of that. It kind of sounds like Jerry Mccann went back to the scene of the crime just to make sure that there is nothing left behind, that there is no evidence. Maybe he disposed of Madeleine's body in the water and he just wanted to make sure that the body kind of floated away and is nowhere to be seen or found. I don't know. What do you guys think? But this just got me thinking. See here, he's saying, I wonder if it was a government-sponsored trip. McCann's wouldn't have been flush with cash. I was wondering that as well. And in one of my videos, or in one of my very many videos around this case, I did make some mention that there could be a possibility that it was perhaps kind of a medical conference or something like that in regards to some, I don't know, either medication technology or treatment, which could have been illegal in the UK, however, legal in other countries, such as Portugal, or a drug trial, which would have been illegal in the UK, but then not in Portugal. And that's why the whole group went there, because maybe they were part of something, and they had to go there for meetings and things like that. I mean, I am not in the medical field, so I have no idea how all these things work. But from my own, I don't know, from my own logic, Ellie is saying you're right, Kat. 87% of criminals where children are involved do go back to the scene of the crime. Yeah, well, I kind of learned this from all the true crime shows that I'm watching and the true crime cases that I'm researching for. So, yeah, it was just an idea that popped into my mind now as I was reading the paragraph. Ellie's also saying Jerry Mccann is in experimental medicine. Yes, yes, he is. Yeah. Chumbai saying lots of doctors on that trip. Drug trial be cheaper abroad. Yes, and also, even though, again, through my research over the years about medicine and conferences and stuff like that, there is also a possibility that perhaps the whole group worked on some research here in the UK for medical purposes, and maybe was even funded by the government, and maybe they were running some trials, some experiments, some tests, which they couldn't do it in the UK, and so they went to Portugal, and it could have been arranged by the government or whoever is funding these experiments and trials. And maybe this would be the explanation as to why all of them got so much support, political and financial, from the beginning. See, saying, I think drug trial too. Haven't seen your previous video about that. Well, to be honest with you, see, I have so many videos and I've done so much research on this case. I cannot say for sure which video it was, but I assume it could have been the series on Port and Down and Guanco Comare, perhaps. Ali, oh, this is interesting. Ali is saying all tests in the UK have to adhere to nice rules and regulations. And then what happens, for example, that these tests, they don't adhere to nice rules and regulations, yet as a medical professional or doctor or whatever involved in this kind of testing, what would happen if you would go from Britain over to, let's say, Portugal, for example, where they don't have to adhere to the same rules? As a professional, would you be able to perform this testing in another country? Jenny saying, I've always wondered if the trip was sponsored by some pharmaceutical company. Worked in a private hospital ages ago. Big Pharma were there every day with giveaways and bribes. Yes, I'm wondering the same thing as well. I've been wondering the same thing as well. We know Big Pharma. We know how they are. We know. We know. That's loads of money there. She is saying, and perhaps they told the government that's how Maddie died, but then Eddie and Keela told a different story. But by then the government was stuck and still needs to deflect attention away from that. Well, I think that they would still need to deflect attention away from that, considering that the case is still very much in the news, is still very much about Madeleine Mccann and that she disappeared, and Christian Bruckner, and all these new searches and stuff like that. So it's not like it would be a different story if it would have faded from the news lines throughout the years. But considering that it's all the time in the news, especially when they need new funding, because I've noticed that when they need new funding, around that time is when we get all these news articles, all these updates, which are not updates, but then they are called updates, and so on and so forth. Ellie, oh yes, I know because I did some research on Port and Down. Obviously, I can't say that I know everything because I don't have any connection to Port and Down. I don't have any insight into Port and Down. It's only from what I've read online. But yes, some of the viruses do start there, and I've also found out that they work with anthrax, which again is very dangerous. And I think that I've read also about some viruses which were frozen and then they got them defrosted or something like that. They brought them back, which is really stupid in my opinion. Gabriel is asking me, Kat, you mentioned in one of your videos you speak Spanish. How about Italian? Well. That is a different story. Romanian is very similar to Spanish and is also very similar to Italian. I am Romanian, so my native language is Romanian. Now, because when I was little, I started learning Spanish. I understand Spanish and I can speak it, I can have a conversation and stuff like that. But because I only got into contact with Italian in my adulthood when I used to live in Italy, being that Italian and Spanish, they are very similar, I'm getting confused in between the words in Spanish and Italian. So I can't say that I speak so I can't say that I speak Italian because if I do speak, let's say, I would say a phrase, I would speak 2 or 3 words in Italian and the rest in Spanish because I mix them up, but being that they are so similar. But then my practice of Spanish was longer rather than the Italian because Spanish, when I was a kid, I used to love soap operas. And on telly, I would watch these soap operas, which were in Spanish language and with subtitles in Romanian. And that's how I learned Spanish. And then my stepmother, she is from Colombia. Well, she's not my stepmother anymore, but she was my stepmother. She's from Colombia, and I used to speak with her on the phone all the time in Spanish because she doesn't really speak English. So I kind of practiced the language, whereas the Italian I didn't. And now I mix them up. So yeah. Ellie is saying we have links and been supported down. You are talking about the anthrax virus that ended up in Scotland, and the whole area is now sealed off. Not necessarily about that one, but that one as well. Yes, I am referring to that one as well. But in more recent times, they are still working with anthrax at Portendown. And I kind of, questioned, like, Why, you know? Oh, Ali, we have links. Oh, sorry, not this one, the other one. Oh, Ali, we have worked in Romania at Dr. Simona Câmpianu Clinic in Sibiu. We were held at the border at gunpoint in early 90s by the border guards, Russian. Right, okay. Well, I'm not from Sibiu. I'm actually from the northwest, near Cluj. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. Gabriel, gracias, Kat. Excelente respuesta. Sí, gracias. Ali saying, we also know about Dr. David Kelly. Yes. Okay, I'm going to move on now with reading. Excuse me. So where was I? Oh, yes. Michael Wright met the mother of the disappeared girl when she was 10 years old. He met the father in 2001, but they did not have a close relationship. However, it was the father of the missing child who demanded his presence in Praia da Luz. On the night of 3rd of May, shortly after the alert of the disappearance, at 23 hours, almost at the same time as the Portuguese police authorities, he reported what was happening in Praia da Luz, stating that it was his wife's mother, Nora, who gave him the first news and that he only spoke to the child's mother between 10 and 11 hours on 4th of May. He never referred to the contact made by the child's father. In the early hours of 4th of May, after Michael became aware of the disappearance, the child's mother received a phone call from a bar in Vilamura, Algarve. According to the owner of the bar, this call was made at the request of someone in the United Kingdom. The possibility that Michael was the person who made the call cannot be ruled out. He assumes that he arrived in Portugal on Saturday, 5th of May, at the request of his father to support him and his family. We believe that he was not merely a supporter, but perhaps the strategist of the answers that the parents would have to give to the authorities. This individual will have had a military background, is involved in the area of new information technology, and is also said to have links to the pharmaceutical industry. He is, at the very least, a man with a wide range of knowledge. The hygiene walk with the child's father allowed for a long and private conversation away from prying eyes and ears 2 days after the disappearance alert. During his hearing with the scope of the letters rogatory in 2008 issued by the Portuguese judicial authorities to be served in the United Kingdom, Michael gave a brief explanation of his stays in Portugal and the reasons for them. The first trip he made was on Saturday, 5th of May, where he stayed in one of the Ocean Club flats and contacted the child's relatives. He monitored emails and responded to several letters. In 2008, this individual stated that on 6th of May, at the pizzeria in Praia da Luz, a British employee and daughter of the owner, this one named George, told him that at dawn, her father had seen in that location a man with a child on his lap. This statement by Michael is a further attempt to justify the existence of an abduction, but his reaction to the information received raises some questions. It's legitimate to ask what Michael did with the information obtained on 6th of May 2007, 2 days after the disappearance. Why did he not inform the Portuguese or British authorities? Presumably, he discussed the information with the child's parents, but they never spoke to the police about this information, which is strange. In 2008, when he revealed the information of the man with a child on his lap, he stressed that this had happened in Praia da Luz. However, it turned out that the pizzeria is in the city of Lagos, near the marina, And what was seen by the owner of the pizzeria, named George B., was a man with a child on his lap walking next to to a woman in the marina area, a long way from Praia da Luz. After 5 days in Praia da Luz, Michael returned to the UK. That was on 11th of May. After the first stay in Portugal, he returned 5 more times, from 14th to 18th of May of the same month, from 8th to 13th of June, during the period when the child's parents had gone to Morocco on one of several publicity trips, having said that he and his wife stayed behind to look after the twins. From 12th to 13th of July, he accompanied the parents on their return to the country for the twins' christening. The mother and twins returned to Portugal on 15th of July without her husband and without Michael. Michael's other trips to Portugal in 2007 took place from 22nd of August to 1st of September and from 7th to 9th of September. On these 2 occasions, he stayed with the child's parents in the house they rented. The Renault Scenic rented by the child's parents already existed at the time of the second trip made by Michael. However, he only agreed to be on the list of drivers of this vehicle from 22nd of August 2007, since until that time the vehicle was only driven by the father and sister-in-law Sandy Cameron, not to mention her husband. The indication of the date on which he was associated with the driving of the vehicle seems to suggest an intention to remain aloof from anything that may have occurred prior to that date. For example, if that vehicle was used in any suspicious movement, he has nothing to do with it, but has knowledge of that suspicious movement because he assumes his association with the vehicle only from 22nd of August. It's suspected that in circumstances that cannot be ruled out, the child's body could have been transported in the boot of the Renault Scenic car rented by the parents. There is speculation that he may have taken advantage of the funeral of a British national whose urn was reportedly in the church in Praia da Luz in June or July 2007 to hide the child's body under the estuaries, having said that he and his wife stayed behind to look after the twins. Oh, this is an interesting theory. Did you ever find out if Jerry did know Maura before this happened? Yes. Yes, they did know each other. Ellie saying, we didn't lose anything, though it wasn't ours to give away. We even fed a Romanian student who was under guard, and he still writes to us every New Year. Hospitality by the Romanians goes on all night. Oh, that's so sweet. If you mean hospitality by the Romanians during holidays, or actually any day, yeah. I mean, yeah. When we have someone come to visit us, we always serve them with whatever we have there. And if we don't, we just go to the shop and buy something to serve them with. Just the same, like, for example, if we are having dinner and you decide to visit us during dinner, we will serve you dinner as well. So, I don't know. I don't think we are the only ones who do this, though. So, on 12th and 13th of July, he accompanied the parents to their country for the twins' baptism. The mother and twins returned to Portugal on 15th of July without her husband and without Michael. Again, this is repeating. Yeah. Okay, so we were left at, there is speculation that the funeral of a British national whose urn was in the Praia da Luz church in June or July 2007, may have been used as an opportunity to hide the child's body underneath. The body was cremated in Ferreira do Alentejo. This may have happened on one of the occasions when the parents were not in Praia da Luz. No one can guess anyone's death. Michael Wright or other members of the child's parents' staff had no way of anticipating a death. But someone connected with the worship of the Anglican Church, namely Father Hubert, would have known of the timing of any funeral. It's important to check the travel arrangements from the UK to Portugal against the list of funerals that took place at Praia da Luz Church. It's important to find out if the booking of the baptism was not a ploy by Michael Wright to keep his parents and the media circus away from Praia da Luz. Was the baptism not planned after the child's disappearance? Was Michael Wright present or not at the baptism ceremony? This is the mystery man who was closest to the child's parents. The role he may have played in this Greek tragedy is not entirely clear, so it's important to know the individual, his life story, his contacts, his abilities, and skills. Ellie, hola cat, we shall soon be asleep. Everyone hugs and see you all soon. Have a good night. Buenas noches, Ali. You guys, you do realize that we are at page 57 of this book? Look, page 57 out of 141. So there is still loads to go. Loads of pages there. Vamos a continuar. Let's carry on. 17. The abduction thesis. On 3rd of September 2007, the Portuguese authorities' liaison officer with the family stated that over time he had witnessed strange behavior on the part of the couple, who reacted very negatively to the increasingly investigative activity, especially when English cinema technical means were used to detect the smell of a corpse, at which point the hypothesis of the child's death emerged. At the time of the notification for questioning as a defendant, the child's mother had a negative reaction, more concerned about herself and her image than about collaborating in the clarification of the facts concerning the disappearance of her daughter. Some of her comments were, "What will my parents think? What will the press say when they find out?" At the time, she also showed her fear for the direction the investigation would take by stating, "The Portuguese police are under pressure from the government to finish the investigation quickly." The mother seemed to fear the end of the investigations, but months later, she resigned herself to the closure of the criminal case and the discontinuation of the investigation. She never did anything to get the Portuguese or British police authorities to resume the investigation, preferring to rely on the private detectives who have been working on the thesis of her abduction, who have speculated on various hypotheses and alleged suspects. Oh, I skipped here. As for the father, according to the family liaison officer, he constantly insisted on handing over letters and emails he received mostly from psychics and mediums, which he himself had selected and which, for the most part, contained information without much credibility about the possible whereabouts of the child and his alleged abductor. Prior to his questioning as a defendant on 7th of September 2007, the father didn't seem to have any doubts about his daughter's death, showing only concern about the evidence of his possible responsibilities, which is also reported by the liaison officer. He was sure that the police had no evidence that could incriminate them in relation to the daughter's death, referring that the police wasted their time in directing the investigation around the parents. Among all the discrepancies I have already mentioned above, I emphasize again that the parents did not cooperate with the police in finding out about the child's victimology, raising difficulties in in accessing medical records, concealing the child's difficulties in sleeping, as well as the possible use of the antihistamine Calpol. This medicine, Calpol, was never found by the police, as were the other medicines. They they have disappeared. According to the mother, that night she would have put the medication in a zippered bag in her room, in the wardrobe, or in the chest of drawers. The medication consisted of Calpol, Nurofen, terfenadine, antipyretics, painkillers for fever and pain, and medicines for heartburn in doses for adults and children. In the case of children, they were sachets in liquid. They concealed the incident described by their friend and Dr. Catherine G., which allegedly occurred 2 years earlier during a holiday in Mallorca when the doctor, David Payne, made sexual gestures towards the missing girl. They used the girl's eye sign as a brand image to publicize the disappearance, which could have endangered her survival if she had been abducted. The media contact did not ask the police for help, nor was this possibility discussed with those responsible for the investigation. Media events were never scheduled with the police. It was on the initiative of the friends and with their agreement that the case was intensively mediatized without any visible practical result, only enabling so far the creation of thousands of sightings and false information without credibility, hindering the work of the investigation, which I think that would have been the purpose. They relied on a representative of the press who, given his former position in the British government, gave rise to speculation about the involvement of political power and the existence of possible political pressure on the police officers in charge of the investigation. In fact, on 23rd of May 2007, the boy's mother wrote in her manuscript, "I left a message for Gordon Brown to call us to increase political pressure." On the same day, she would write again about Gordon Brown, then British Prime Minister. "Gordon Brown called and spoke to us, very kind and giving strength, a somewhat emotional feeling afterwards." As well as relying on a representative of the press, they have used media agencies to influence attitudes and behavior. The use of the media has its pros and cons. It's always an important ally in the search for the child because it's the quickest way to distribute and disseminate information and photos of the missing child. The survivor guide itself, to which reference has already been made, advises to contact them immediately because time is not on the child's side. It's considered that if communication is too intense, the abductor might release the child. Why did Kay need to put the drugs away that night? They never used it that week, according to them. And how come they were all gone? How come they were missing? Yep. Jen is asking, are we talking Michael Wright married into family or the unrelated Michael Wright? The latter hired the Renault Scenic before the McCanns hired it. Michael Wright, the one who hired the Scenic, the Renault. But isn't the same Michael Wright that Goncalo Amaral is referencing in the book the same one as the one who hired the Scenic and also the one who married into the family? This pressure on the abductor could be detrimental and put the child's life at risk. So the decision to use the means of communication must be weighed between the parents and the police. Another trade-off is the fact that through the use of the media, parents gain public status, gaining unwanted fame, achieving celebrity, but reducing their privacy. The thesis of a premeditated and planned abduction is, in my opinion, taken to absurdity by the British press, as reported in the English newspaper Sunday Express of 20th of September 2009. The clean execution of the abduction with no trace of DNA or any usable evidence means it was highly professional and precisely planned. The mother carried with her a notebook in which she wrote down her thoughts, questions, and important recording information, but the contents of that notebook were not brought to the attention of investigators. It only came to light during the search of her home at the end of August 2007. The appropriateness of using a reward was not discussed with the police, but was an initiative of a British newspaper. So far, the reward has had no effect, but has only served to inspire the abduction of 9-year-old Shannon Matthews, who was abducted on the evening of 19th of February 2008 in the UK. She was held captive by an acquaintance of her mother. It was the execution of a joint plan in order to collect the reward that had been offered. The parents developed a plan and a strategy to continue the search for the child. But not only that, they shut down websites, coerced and intimidated anyone who doubted them, initiated civil proceedings against me. For the first 6 months, I was the operational coordinator of the investigation. They sought to question my credibility and my personal and professional good name, falsely claiming that I had defamed them and that the conclusions reached by the police, the death of the child, endangered her recovery. They have defined a plan and a strategy, but have not collaborated with the police to define their role and that of others in publicizing the disappearance through the media. They have maintained a high level of awareness in the local and international community. They have requested the production of a portrait of the child at an advanced age and have been publishing new information based on the sightings. But prior to these publications, they didn't contact the police so that the investigation would not be compromised. The hiring of private detectives did not respect the principle that it should only take place if there was a conviction that they could do more and better than the police, or in a different way. This engagement was motivated solely by the fact that the parents did not trust the work of the Portuguese and British police, as the police authorities initially did not allow the investigation to be limited to the abduction thesis alone, as they had wished. The parents kept an open mind to approach psychics and mediums, and on learning of the dreams and visions, many of them fraudulent and self-induced, may have suffered stress, loss of hope, or a sense of unfounded hope. This may have occurred because it was the parents who recorded the information from psychics and mediums and not people close to the family, and even written in the as is advisable in these situations of prolonged absence. According to good rules, and even written in the survival guide, when a child goes missing, the parents and the police become partners. The common goal of finding the missing child requires it. The police are no longer seen as an instrument of repression, but as a tool to help parents and relatives who are victims of the absence of a child. A partnership is thus established between the parents and the police, which by nature must be based on mutual respect, trust, honesty, and cooperation. In this case, the parents were neither complete in their statements nor honest in their answers, which jeopardized the desired cooperation and led to contradictions and several inconsistencies that have never been fully clarified. It's strange, to say the least, that they have not valued their participation in a reenactment of the events of that fateful night of May the 3rd, 2007. which would have served to clarify and perhaps eliminate any suspicions about their possible responsibilities. Without wishing to be naive, I think this may have been due to the need to give the impression that their children had not been abandoned without security. There was also, I think, a certain arrogance. They were above suspicion, their actions were not questionable or subject to scrutiny. The police were wasting their time in suspecting the parents and should concentrate only and only on the idea of abduction, determining for themselves what steps to take. With this kind of behavior, the desirable cooperation with the police was difficult to achieve. They forgot that it's not always a stranger who is responsible for the disappearance, and they were not prepared for the suspicion of someone close to them. By not participating in the reconstruction of the events, they could not get off the list of suspects, and they remained there until the facts are properly clarified. To better understand the interest of the reconstruction of the facts and its impact on the eventual elimination of suspicion on the child's parents, let's look at what the public prosecutor's office says in this regard in the order to close the case. We believe that the main victims were the defendants, who lost the possibility of proving what they had been protesting since their constitution as defendants, their innocence regarding the fateful event. The investigation was also hindered because the facts remain unclarified. If polygraph or lie detector tests were allowed in Portugal, as they are in the United States, the parents could follow the advice of the survivor guide and in time have asked to take the test to be quickly excluded from the list of suspects. Thus, one way to remove suspicion from the child's parents would have been to resort to polygraph testing in the US. Certainly, local law enforcement agencies would not have refused to conduct such a test. In the order and in the investigation in 2008, the public prosecutor's office considered that none of the evidence that led to the couple being named as defendants was subsequently confirmed or strengthened. It added that the couple's non-participation in the practice of any criminally relevant act appears to result from a set of objective circumstances which the magistrate assessed and interpreted in his own way, for example, on which he issued an opinion. The parents did not insist, nor do they appear to have encouraged family members and others close to the child to collaborate in the investigation process. It was not possible, for example, to hear from the child's grandfather about the regular use of alcohol, and they did nothing to involve friends in the reconstruction of events. So that there is no inconvenient scrutiny of the parents of long-term absent children, they should not direct the support fund. In this case, the parents are directors of the excuse me. Oh, this one doesn't make sense. In this case, the parents are directors of the also hindered the investigation, since such facts were not clear. Again, this bit here is repeating. Okay, moving on here. In this case, the parents are directors of the fund and family members have held prominent positions in the management of the fund. Most of their interviews have left more doubts and uncertainties than credible answers, with the child's mother seemingly controlled by the father's hand, a hand that has seemed to serve more to silence her at times than to comfort her. The need is felt to reaffirm the lack of evidence as to whether the child is alive or dead, or that something bad has happened to her, as if the mere fact that she has been abducted does not in itself constitute evil. For the parents, this seems to be the only way to keep alive the hope of finding their daughter and to prolong the search. The mother has already written a book about the child's disappearance in which she claims to tell the whole truth and which is based on the thesis of abduction by a PDF. They have thus made use of their freedom of expression, and this manuscript, as it is written, is an important document for the investigation. Chapter 18, Control Risks, the Apparent Hijacking. Control Risks Group was the first private detective agency to investigate the disappearance. Its findings were used by the British police as part of Operation Task to construct the timeline. Contracted by the International Family Law Group on 11th of May 2007, the agency sent two lead investigators to Praia da Luz on 13th of May 2007 to support the child's parents. The investigators were tasked to conduct an in-depth interview with the child's parents and relevant members of the holiday group. Therefore, the interviews were limited to family and friends. Investigators described the following crime scene. At approximately 10 p.m. on Thursday, 3rd of May 2007, a 3-year-old girl who was on holiday with her parents and twin brothers was discovered missing at the Ocean Club, Praia da Luz, Lagos, Portugal, from the family's rented flat, provided by Mark Warner Limited. It appears that she was abducted from the front bedroom of the flat while her parents were dining in a tapas bar adjacent to the resort with a group of 7 other adults with whom they had traveled to the resort. For the control risks investigators, their work was hampered for 3 reasons. The fact that almost 10 days elapsed between the night of the abduction and the first opportunity to interview key witnesses. They had no access to the crime scene or to any information gathered by the Portuguese authorities or the Leicestershire police. Any attempt to contact and interview other witnesses would have contravened Portuguese law and, in all likelihood, would have led to unwanted speculation by the British and international media. As for the investigation carried out by risk control detectives between 13 and 16th of May 2007, this included interviews to record in as much detail as possible the events leading up to the discovery of the child's disappearance. Interviewees included the parents, friends Jane Tanner, Russell O'Brien, Matthew Oldfield, and Emma, an employee of the Ocean Day Care Center. They had access to an elaborate timeline prepared by Russell O'Brien, listing the collective memories of the adults in the holiday group, which, according to the investigators, was the document drawn up together with a British liaison officer in Portugal. They also had access to plans of the complex and flat 5A, photographs of the exterior of the block of flats, and relevant locations mentioned in witness statements. It's unclear why they didn't interview David Payne, Fiona Payne, and Fiona Payne's mother. According to the risk control detectives, the main findings were as follows. Time of the abduction, entry to flat 5A, motive for the abduction. The detectives listed in order of probability the various hypotheses for each of their key findings. Regarding the timing of the abduction, the detectives highlight the fact that, as is evident from the chronology of events detailed in the witness statements, the ad hoc control of all the children by their parents on all 3 floors of the ground floor was such that it would have been extremely difficult for the perpetrator to calculate the optimum time to enter floor 5A. In the realm of possibilities, in order of probability, they would be that the offender was nearby, observed the father leaving the flat at around 21:05, and knew from having observed the flat on previous nights that there was sufficient time to get in and get the child out before the next check. Although not significant, the parents were concerned that the child had asked them where they were when she and her brother had woken up the night before her abduction. It's possible that the perpetrator tried to break in through the window on Wednesday night. That an accomplice was watching the group at the tapas restaurant and provided confirmation to the perpetrator, possibly by mobile phone, that it was safe to proceed. That the offender had already entered the flat and was hiding inside when the father came out after checking at around 9:05. As to the time of the abduction, risk control detectives considered Jane Tanner to be a key witness, as she stated that she saw in front of her as she was walking up Rua Dr. Francisco Gentil Martins to the block of flats at around 9:05 p.m., a man carrying a child crossing the junction with Rua Dr. Agostino da Silva from left to right, west to east. Unfortunately, it only later occurred to him that the child was almost certainly Maddie, identifiable by her distinctive pink pajamas. As for the entrance to flat 5A, detectives clarified that it had 2 points of entry at the front of the building, a heavy wooden door fitted with a key-operated double deadbolt mortise lock, and at the rear, facing the swimming pool and play area, aluminum sliding balcony windows, double glazed with a single central latch point consisting of an open or closed button on the handle. The windows on the east facade are at a considerable height above the level of the pavement outside the building, and there are no indications that they could have allowed entry. The investigation shows that the father of the child lied to the judicial police during his first statement, which took place on 4th of May 2007. In that statement, the father said, "Then at around 21:05, the declarant arrived at the club, entered the room with the corresponding key, and the door was locked. As stated by the risk control detectives, the key to the front door, which was not locked that night, had been left on the shelf that forms the partition between the kitchen and the living room. As for the scenario described by the mother when she notices the disappearance, there are also differences between what she told the judicial police and risk control. These detectives described the scene as follows. The double-glazed sliding window was open and the exterior blind was almost completely raised. The curtains, which almost reached the floor, were left in the run position. The mother had told the criminal investigation police. The window was also open, the blinds were up, and the curtains were drawn, when he had certainly closed everything, which he always did. The difference lies in the position of the curtains, drawn, closed, or drawn open. And further on, it can be read that the parents could not specify whether the window had remained closed on the inside since the day of their arrival, but that the blinds had been kept closed with the curtains drawn to keep the room cool for their 3 children. Risk management detectives conclude that the parents were undoubtedly lured by a false sense of security and didn't realize that the light external blinds could easily be raised from the outside and served only as sun protection and not as security blinds. It's not made clear by these detectives how they came to this conclusion, whether they themselves tried to open the blinds from the outside or whether they only rely on the statements of the child's parents. Contrary to what the father claims, the shutters on that window are not easy to open from the outside, which was verified by the judicial police and by the journalists who tried to enter the flat through the window. In fact, the witness, Diane, refers to this impossibility. She wishes to point out that immediately afterwards, she went to the outside of the flat to see if she could lift the shutter manually from the outside and found it impossible. The lure of a false sense of security is the idea with which the parents tried to justify the child's disappearance, but it does not clarify the simulation of the abduction. As the risk management detectives didn't interview the witness Diane, Fiona Payne's mother, and David Payne's mother-in-law, they will not have gathered the correct information about the blinds on the child's bedroom window. In the field of possibilities of entry into flat 5A and in order of probability, control risks detectives consider. The offender climbed up the outside blind and opened the window, which was unlocked or with the latch open. It cannot be ruled out that the perpetrator had access to the flat during the day and opened the latch to provide access later. This theory is supported to some extent by an apparent sighting reported to the police and reported in the press of a man seen wandering near the flat during the afternoon. There is also the possibility that an Ocean Club employee with access to the flat deliberately assisted the perpetrator by unlocking the window during the day. Entry through the terrace window between 21:05 and 22, the bedroom window having been opened to facilitate the offender's exit with the child, to pass the child to an accomplice, or in any of these cases, as a quick escape point in case the individual was disturbed during the act of child abduction. In any of these cases, the perpetrator is most likely to have left through the front door, which could be opened by simply picking the latch on the lock. A duplicate or master key will have been used to enter through the front door and that the window was open to pass the child to an accomplice outside. A set of hypotheses of entry and exit by the pseudo-stalker where the bedroom window assumes the primary role, going so far as to assert that the offender, after entering the flat with the front door unlocked, still bothered to open the window as an alternative escape route. Recall that this is the window with no signs of having been forced, no gloves, where only the fingerprints of the child's mother were found in the opening position. As for the motives for the abduction, the risk control detectives consider the most likely to be a lone offender who abducts the child for his own gratification, multiple offenders acting in concert for their own gratification or personal gain. The first hypothesis would be supported by the sighting made by Jane Tanner, who suggested that the offender took the child to a vehicle parked east of the junction, perhaps in one of the parking areas along Rua de Agostino da Silva, or to a nearby house. For the detectives, in case the offender had not acted alone, the most logical thing would have been for the accomplice to watch the flat and wait in a vehicle well to the west of the junction, ready for the offender to come out of the flat with the child, and then he would have stopped by the pavement to quickly flee the scene. Please note that Rua de Agostina da Silva is a one-way street and does not allow east-west traffic. This conclusion about traffic does not correspond to reality. Rua D'Agostino da Silva allowed traffic in both directions. On the other hand, the detectives do not take into account the fact that the man with the child on his lap was heading towards the brightest part of the village. On the other hand, if a car were used, he could only drive towards where the child's father was talking to his friend Jeremy, or drive towards the access road to the block of flats. When risk management detectives were in Portugal from 13th to 16th of May 2007, the evidence from the Irish family who had seen a man with a child on his lap at 10 p.m. to the west of the flat was not yet known. The detectives themselves tend to downplay but do not rule out the possibility that a highly organized group of human traffickers perpetrated the kidnapping. This devaluation is due to the existence of much easier methods of acquiring children for this purpose, for example, for trafficking. Excuse me. For control risks detectives, the missing child would have been specially selected and the routine of the group on holiday was observed for several days prior to the abduction. This suggests that the perpetrators were based locally and knew the layout and routine of the Ocean Club. Control risks detectives conclude that the kidnapping has taken place as seen above. The conclusions of these investigators may be interesting, although most of them are assumptions and generalities. The most striking of these conclusions is the first: a kidnapping has occurred. They include in their conclusions the perceptions of the father, the likelihood that the abductor was inside the house when he went there. We are faced with speculation. There is no evidence for what they claim. Chapter 19. Other private detectives and more abduction theses. In Portugal, in the case of criminal investigations, the activity of private detectives is prohibited. It is the state, through its security forces and services, acting under the supervision of the Public Prosecutor's Office in accordance with the rules of the Code of Criminal Procedure, which is responsible for investigating each and every crime. Despite this prohibition, in the case of this child, private detectives have passed through here at the behest of the child's parents, in the face of the passivity and almost tacit agreement of the authorities with the competence to react to this intolerable interference. All these private detectives worked with the aim of collecting or even producing evidence of the involvement of third parties completely unknown to the family as responsible for the mysterious disappearance. Since 10th of May 2007, these detectives have been working in our country under the silence of our authorities. They were looking for a missing English child, but they were hired to investigate a kidnapping and only a kidnapping. After 5 years, they found nothing. Their investigations were imbued with the best monetary sentiments, it's true, but still they proved incapable. They failed to recover the child safe and sound. They could not prove the existence of an abduction, whether occasional, premeditated, planned, motivated by sexual gratification, or for any other reason. What they did manage to do was to convince a few unworried people of the relevance of the suspicion of a suitable PDF, but unknown to family and friends. The reports of the private investigations have been kept secret, but some information has come to light. It seems that one of these private detectives may have appropriated a large sum of money, but that is something to be investigated in England and the US. Anyone looking for a missing child cannot do without the intervention and work of police with investigative competence. Only those who are afraid of the results of police work need private detectives. The private detective company Metodo 3 would have been the second to work for these parents. They conducted searches with the prospect of an abduction and produced several sightings. Based in Barcelona, the company is said to have started working in Portugal in October 2007, obtaining meetings with those responsible for the investigation. The search was more for a PDF than for the child itself. The child was a reality on the night of 3rd of May 2007, but a PDF responsible for the abduction is something unreal, a mere speculation, which was reinforced by the general conclusions of both the control risks investigators and the Spanish company. To want to turn these conclusions without any factual or evidentiary basis into proof is to construct a merely virtual reality. Sightings have been created and the expenditure of large amounts of donated money has been justified. For Metodo 3, Morocco was fertile territory for the fate of a blonde British girl abducted in Portugal. The remains of the missing girl were sighted there, which are said to have been produced intentionally. This strong possibility that the sightings of the child were created is, in my opinion, another reason why all the reports produced by that detective agency, which will be in the possession of the child's parents, must be known. Following the disastrous and economically relevant activity of Metodo 3, the parents decided to hire two retired British detectives, Dave Edgar and Arthur Cowley, the former of whom went so far as to state, I have reviewed the file and we are pursuing lines of inquiry based on the information we have gleaned from it. The first question is whether such a statement is true. We would like to believe it is, but the thousands of pages that make up the Portuguese criminal file and the various appendices advise caution. On the other hand, as these detectives are not fluent in the language of Camões, have they read the original version or the English translation, which we hope is reliable? Over the years, I have had several discussions with colleagues who investigated the disappearance of the British girl with me and who, like me, didn't agree with the abrupt end of the investigation. For us police professionals, any investigation should be carried through to the end, not left to rot in the dust of some filing cabinet. Other discussions focused on the role of private detectives hired by parents and the fund created for the search. The work of private detectives is the subject of enormous criticism. There are more commentators than investigators. The detectives have, they say, produced sketches based on the testimonies in the file, but have been unable to make positive identifications. A man with signs or marks on his face would, according to these detectives, be the result of a revision of the Portuguese investigation. Without any credible evidence or foundation, they advanced a strong conclusion. Within a radius of 10 to 15 kilometers of Praia da Luz, there is someone who has the answer to the mystery of the disappearance. The possibility that the British girl and her two brothers were drugged by the kidnapper is ruled out by the fact that the twins did not wake up on the night of 3rd of May 2007. However, they could have followed Calpol's lead, but that lead would lead directly to questioning the possible responsibility of the parents, and that is not what they were hired to do. Some advocates of a planned abduction by a PDF want to convince the public that the abductor came to the flat fully prepared with enough drugs, probably chloroform, to render the three children unconscious. They might question the fact that the children's mother spent the night in the hours after the disappearance checking the brothers' breathing and only reported her suspicions to the police more than 2 months after the tragic events, but they do not. It's good to make this clear. The examinations carried out on 4th of May 2007 are clear. No trace, in this case odor, of chloroform was found on the bed and on the bedclothes of the missing child. As for traces, experts say that despite the time that has elapsed, there may be forensic clues in the clothing or the bedding. It's a pity that the fate of the twins' bedding on the night of their disappearance remains unclear. All that remained of the cots where these children slept soundly were the respective mattresses. As we have said, the strong possibility that the children were drugged is a foregone conclusion and in line with police logic and reasoning. What remains to be elucidated is whether this was done by third parties, strangers to the family, or voluntarily by the parents with the administration of Calpol in a customary ritual of putting the children to sleep. Okay, we are now at chapter 20, and after I finish with this chapter, I'm going to stop reading for tonight. 20. Grange, Gretchen, and Associates, and Ecce Homo. In May 2011, 4 years after the disappearance, I traveled again to Madrid to participate in the program Espejo Público on Antena 3. On this occasion, the idea was to arrive at Barajas Airport late in the afternoon, spend the night in a hotel near the television station's facilities, and the following morning be present at the program, returning the next day. All very simple and practical. My plan would fall apart. In southeastern Spain, at 1847, on 11th of May 2011, a tectonic fault moved, releasing enough energy to destroy and kill. The coverage of that terrible natural accident was more important than my interview. In the solitude of the hotel room, I thought about what I was doing there and the almost divine intervention that seemed to contain a message. I shouldn't be there, at least not for the purposes intended. Life is made of more important things. Despite the media coverage of the earthquake, the program's production managed to fit in my interview, which went smoothly. On my return to the Algarve, still at Faro Airport, I was questioned by a television crew. They wanted to know my opinion on Scotland Yard's intervention in the Maddie case. I tried to give a polite answer. The criminal case was still shelved and decaying. We, the Portuguese, did not investigate anything, and now the London police come to investigate a crime that is our exclusive territorial competence. I tell the journalist that Scotland Yard is a competent police force used to kidnapping cases, and that an objective investigation is expected, covering all hypotheses, starting from where the investigation was left when it was decided to close it. The possible responsibility in the disappearance of those who had the duty to guarantee the custody and safety of that British child. Despite my expectations, I did not believe in an objective investigation by the British police. Their late intervention in the case denotes the existence of a kind of bargaining with the child's parents. They said they were reevaluating documents and identifying possible lines of inquiry, but the analysis of the investigations carried out by private detectives and agencies hired by the parents pointed once again in one direction only: abduction by a PDF. The so-called Operation Grange was underway. The initial objective was to get the British and Portuguese authorities to collaborate in order to reopen the case, which had been shelved since 2008. Over time, we began to understand the strategy of reopening the Portuguese criminal case, and this could only happen when certain conditions were met. It did not matter that the Portuguese law and the closure order spoke of the need to analyze new facts. Although the parents, as is clear from the mother's book, equated the testimony of the friend Jane Tanner with the objective and disinterested testimony of Martin Smith's family, considering it as proof of the existence of a male abduction, the British police realized that the friend's testimony cast doubt on the abduction thesis. Her testimony distorted reality and was based on lies that evolved over time. The time at which Jane Tanner claimed to have seen the man with the child on his lap, 9:05, 9:15, shortened the window of opportunity, the small size of which placed the parents as suspects, and destroyed the planned abduction theory. As I have written before, there is only one way to eliminate Jane Tanner's testimony from the abduction case. There must be a man who, on that night, at that time, on that street, walking in the direction indicated by Jane Tanner, was carrying a child. It does not matter whether, at the time of the sighting by Martin Smith's family, the father of the child was in fact dining in the restaurant of the complex. The employees of the restaurants, Svetlana and Joachim, claimed that the father was absent for more than 30 minutes, but their testimony was not considered relevant. None of the facts reported so far seem to be of interest to the British police. In October 2013, after 2 years of intense work to reevaluate the investigation, a pseudo-reconstitution of the facts takes place. A reconstitution that I consider humiliating for Portuguese justice, carried out in the absence of the judicial police, the prosecutor's office, and the procedural procedures, but supported by a British television channel. SC Homo, which I've never heard about, if I'm honest with you. The British police produced 2 composite portraits based on testimonies, and surprisingly, the man appears. 6 years later, this man, the mystery man, is revealed. He turns out to be a British tourist on holiday in the area, carrying his daughter on his lap after picking her up from a nursery. For 6 years, he said nothing but kept the clothes he was wearing that night, as well as his daughter's pajamas. No one asks, no one wonders why this man waited 6 years to reveal himself. Why now? Why, after the British police reassessed and finally found what was obvious in Jane Tanner's testimony? The man turned up, but this fact, unknown to the Portuguese criminal case, the Portuguese judicial authorities, and perhaps the judicial police, is convenient for the abduction thesis, but highly suspicious. Who is the man? Had he gone at that time of night to pick up his daughter from the nursery? Which nursery? The one at the resort where he was staying, or the one at the beginning of the street he was walking down? That nursery is not open at that time of night, 21:15. Why no mention of the child's mother? Wasn't she on holiday with her daughter and father? With this man's revelation, the abduction thesis suffices with the sighting of the Martin Smith's family, which occurred relatively far from the flat from which the child disappeared. This sighting posed a serious problem for the abduction thesis. Witnesses recognized both the father and the missing child. The British police easily solved the problem. From that moment on, the recognition by Martin Smith's family only confirmed that the abductor resembled the child's father. From that day on, the search began for an abductor who resembled the father of the missing child and who, at the time of the abduction, was dressed in the same way. In other words, that night there are 3 people who have the same tastes in the way they dress and who will have dressed the same. The mysterious man unveiled in October 2013, the man with the child on his lap spotted by the family of Martin Smith, and the child's father himself. Note another detail. We do not know how the mystery man walks with a child on his lap, but the family of Martin Smith recognized the father of the missing child by the way he walks with a child on his lap. In conclusion, the abductor looks like the father of the missing child, walks the same way with the child on his lap as the father, dressed the same way as him, and the mystery man. It sounds confusing, but perhaps it is a kind of British salad. For the British police, the revelation of the mystery man and the elimination of Jane Tanner's testimony have widened the window of opportunity so that it is now between 8:30 p.m., the time the parents went to dinner, and 10 p.m., but they have not confirmed the logic of a planned abduction. Only someone without means of transport or living in the area where he was seen could be the perpetrator of the abduction and be on foot. The hypothesis that the kidnapper could have left a support and getaway vehicle in the area also raises doubts. The perpetrator does not want to be seen or recognized. Leaving the getaway and support vehicle far from the crime scene is taking unnecessary and unforeseen risks. Where were the Portuguese police at the time of the pseudo reconstitution and revelation of the mystery man? Since 2011, more or less after the start of Operation Grange, the Portuguese criminal case investigating the case of the disappearance was transferred to a section of the Oporto Junta, where it was targeted by a syndicate. In the opinion of the pseudo specialists, this was only an analysis. For some unwary people, this analysis was carried out by a team of investigators with experience and positive results in cases of disappearances. This idea is based on the case of a young woman who disappeared near the city of Lamego while driving alone in her car. The young woman had a mobile phone, and on the road there were traces of a crash. More than a month after the disappearance, the young woman's body was found inside the car at the bottom of a ravine near the place where there were crash marks. As is easy to understand, this case of the disappearance of the young girl from Lamigo required a rather complex investigation, perhaps involving international police cooperation, and has many similarities with the disappearance of the British girl, which occurred on 3rd of May 2007 in Praia da Luz, many kilometers from the city of Porto. I apologize for the irony, but that is all. Following the corroboration of the testimony of witness Jane Tanner, the investigation in Portugal has been reopened and the criminal case has emerged from the dusty archives in which it had been kept since the summer of 2008. The reopening of the case was not based on the results of the British police investigation nor on new facts, but only on the false idea that the former employee of the resort who had died in a tractor accident was possibly responsible. From that moment on, in the words of the judicial police, the investigation has been carried out in coordination with the international authorities, obeying the rules of judicial and police cooperation. It's good to remember that this type of cooperation is a two-way process and that the investigation of the facts in the criminal case is entirely the responsibility of the Portuguese judicial and police authorities. It's good not to forget, as the late Guillermino da Encarnazo, director of the Faro Judicial Police Directorate, said in May 2007. In Portugal, it is the dog that wags the tail. To better understand the revelation of the mystery man and taking a small leap in the chronological narrative we have made so far, let's go to May 2018. The alleged identity of the man is known, but the mystery remains. A British doctor, Julian Totman, told an English newspaper that he was the mystery man, the one pictured in full body months after the girl's disappearance. According to this individual, he had gone to pick up his 2-year-old daughter from the village nursery in Praia da Luz that day. Through this news item, the man's wife was heard for the first time. She made a pertinent statement saying that her husband told the local police that it could be him, but we never knew anything else. So for 6 years, this British doctor kept his clothes and his daughter's pajamas because he was waiting for the police to contact him. With this surreal justification, he tries to justify why it took him so long to talk to the British police. He only did so in 2013. For reasons as yet unknown, he waited another 5 years before publicly identifying himself. Perhaps one day he will argue that he only followed the instructions of the British police. And guys, with this, let's conclude today's reading. Don't forget, the next chapter will be chapter 21. And oh, we are at page 70 out of 141. Thank you, Dean. Thank you. I feel like I can't even speak properly anymore because of so much reading. Okay, I'm going to be going through some of the comments here. Thank you, C. Thank you guys for being here and for staying with me. Yeah, Chumba. I can't wait for the next bit. I can't wait to read the next chapters. And, so far, more or less, what most of us thought that happened, it's kind of like Goncalo Amaral confirmed it, and also the Portuguese police had the same theories. So see, saying here about that name, it's a biblical reference. I'm not religious, but I think it's when Jesus holding the crown of thorns and Pontius Pilate mocks him with Ecce homo, behold the man. Oh, I'm not religious either, so I wouldn't know any biblical reference to anything, sorry. Okay, guys, I'm going to end this live now. And I think that I'll be doing the next part on Friday next week, about the same time. Yeah, it should be on Friday. Anyway, you'll probably get a notification. I'm going to try and schedule it in advance so you guys know a bit earlier. But again, I might have to delay the time because, as you've seen this night, I was supposed to start at 10 p.m. and then I had issues with the microphone. So, yeah, the time will be just a rough time, really. Night, everyone. Take care, and I will see you next week. Bye.